Hello, everyone. Before we start, let's go over a couple of house rules. So, for those who just joined, you've probably noticed that we have a new Go to app interface. So, if you want to ask questions, feel free to just click on the questions icon, type in your questions, and you may submit your questions throughout the webinar. But we will answer those during the Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. Secondly, the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available to all registered participants afterwards, of course, as common practice. So again, welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, Unlocking the Power of Data Discovery and Data Classification in DLP. My name is Anna Milan, Product Marketing Manager for Safetica, and joining me today is one of Safetica's product managers, Tomasz Pazurek. So, with that said, let's have a quick look at the agenda. So, we'll start by defining what data discovery and data classification actually mean. For those of you who are in the data security space, you might be very familiar with these terms. But of course, understanding their full significance is still very important. Next, we will dive into how these processes fit within a data loss prevention or DLP strategy. And this is where things get really interesting because it's all about preventing data leaks before they even happen. And finally, we will wrap up by looking at how Safetica approaches these processes to enhance data security for organizations like yours. And definitely, it's an exciting 30 minutes for us, and there's definitely a lot to cover. So, I want to kick things off with data discovery. Now, when I say data discovery, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For many organizations or businesses, it's really the frustration of not knowing where their sensitive data is stored. And here in Safetica, we totally get it. We understand this frustration, especially in the environments people work today. Data is just everywhere across cloud platforms, internal systems, even on user devices. And the pain point here is clear. If you don't know where your sensitive data is, how can you protect it? You cannot secure what you can't see. You can't protect what you don't know. And so the goal of data discovery is very simple. It's really about locating, mapping, and identifying sensitive data no matter where it lives. The idea is to get a full visibility of your data landscape. And how do we go about this? You start by scanning, searching your entire environment, and this means everything from databases, cloud storage, even individual endpoints. Then you need to map that data, creating an inventory that helps you track where your sensitive information is. And of course, we need to continuously do this. We need continuous monitoring. Data discovery is not a set it and forget it process. New data is created every day, and we need to be able to keep up with these changes. So now that we know what data discovery is, when it comes to data discovery, there are a few different angles to consider because, as we know, not all data is the same. You've probably heard of structured and unstructured data, but in Safetica, we also want to put emphasis on sensitive data discovery and contextual data discovery. So, structured discovery, data discovery, think of this like your databases, your spreadsheets. It's really the data that's organized neatly. This one's relatively straightforward because it has a defined structure like rows and columns. Unstructured data discovery, as the name implies, is a bit trickier because we're talking about things like emails or big documents, and they don't follow a standard format, but they can still contain sensitive information. And let's be honest, unstructured data is everywhere. And then I want to highlight sensitive data discovery. And this is where we focus specifically on finding personal or confidential information, things like credit card numbers, social security numbers, health records. It's those high risk data that you need to prioritize. And then finally, contextual data discovery. And in Safetica, we really put high value or very high importance on contextual awareness because the metadata around the file is just as important as the content itself. And what do I mean by this? It's where was the file created? Who has access to it? These are the questions that help determine if the data is truly sensitive. Now, once you've discovered that your data, what's next? This is where data classification comes in. And again, the problem many organizations face once you found all your sensitive data, the key question is how do you then make sure that it's handled appropriately? A lot of businesses struggle with overclassifying or underclassifying data. Either you're protecting too much and slowing things down or hindering your employees. And even worse, you're leaving important data exposed. So the goal of data classification is to categorize based on its sensitivity. Think of it like creating different buckets. So some data will need more stringent protection, other data might need restricted access, other data might just need monitoring. But the point is to apply the right controls to the right data. And how do we do it? First, we define your classification policies. What does sensitive mean for your business? What data needs the most protection? And then you apply security controls based on those classifications. Like, do you just monitor, or do you block, or do you restrict access, or do you block but give the user an option to override? So, again, you can apply these security controls based on the classifications that you have defined. Now, there are also different ways you can classify data. Again, for those of you in this space, you know too well that there's content based, context based, and user based classification. Some solutions would integrate these classifications to better identify or more accurately classify sensitive data. But let me go through each one by one. So for content based classification, this is where you analyze the actual content of a file. So think of it as scanning your documents for things like credit card numbers, social security numbers, and this is great for catching hidden sensitive information. But it can also sometimes flag false positives. Context-based classification, again, this is all about metadata, data about the data. So instead of reading the content itself, you look at things like who created the file, where is it stored, or how is it being used. So it's more indirect, but it can be a faster, more accurate way to spot sensitive data. And then you have user-based classification. As the name implies, you put the responsibility in the hands of your users. So they decide how to classify the data that they're working with. And it does require a bit more trust and training, but then it can cut down on false positives because it is a human who defines the classification. So we've defined what data discovery and data classification are. We've identified the different types of both of these concepts or processes. But let's bring it all together and ask the key question and the most important question in this webinar. Why do data discovery and classification matter so much when it comes to data loss prevention? Without these two processes, your DLP strategy would be shooting in the dark. You wouldn't know where your sensitive data is, and you wouldn't know how to protect it. The goal is to ensure that you can enforce data protection policies based on the real sensitivity of your data. And by discovering and classifying your data, you can apply granular DLP controls that stop sensitive data from leaking or falling into the wrong hands. And Thomas will explain to you how Safetica does that cleverly later on in the presentation. Of course, it goes without saying that when you incorporate data discovery and classification into your DLP strategy, there are tons of benefits. Obviously, it's holistic visibility, so you get a full view of where your sensitive data is across the entire organization. And when you have a smart tool that combines different aspects of data discovery and data classification, hopefully nothing slips through the cracks. Second, you have proactive risk management. So again, instead of reacting to data breaches, you can prevent them before they happen by identifying and protecting sensitive data early. Needless to say, with visibility and accurate classification or categorization comes enhanced security policies, because now you can apply DLP policies to give the right protection based on the sensitivity of your data. And because you have these controls in place, you'll have an easier way or an easier time meeting regulatory requirements. So, whether it's GDPR, HIPAA, or other regulations, knowing where your data is and how it's classified makes compliance a lot more straightforward. So again, a lot of benefits. We do see the value and the benefits of data discovery and classification. But it's also important to mention that data discovery and classification are not without their challenges. And I would like to go over a few common ones. First is false positives and negatives. You will sometimes classify data that doesn't need protection, or worse, miss data that does. So it's a balance, and overclassifying can slow things down. Then you have data volume and variety. There is just so much data, and that is a fact, and it's everywhere in all kinds of formats. And so managing that scale is very challenging, can be very tough. And then you have data silos. Sensitive data can be scattered across different departments or systems, making it hard to get a full picture. Not only is data scattered, but there's also, data is also constantly changing. So dynamic data environments, data is being created, moved, and deleted. And keeping track of these changes is an ongoing challenge, is an ongoing task. And lastly, integration with integration with existing systems. Plugging data discovery and classification tools into your existing infrastructure, especially older systems, can be sometimes tricky. So let's put this in mind. Again, we've covered what data discovery and data classification are. We know why they matter, but we also know how they can be challenging but very essential to data loss prevention. And with that in mind, I now turn you over to Tomasz, who will show you how Safetica simplifies data discovery and data classification, and at the same time addresses their challenges and ultimately makes these processes more effective for your organizations. Over to you, Tomasz.
So, good day everyone. My name is Tomasz, and I represent Safetica as a product manager. Allow me to share more with you. Now that you have heard about the core concepts of data discovery and data classification, let's together delve deeper into the ways Safetica addresses these challenges. First, let me start with data discovery. What exactly data discovery is, you've already learned from Anna. Data discovery follows a different principle from monitoring the rest of the life operations. Data discovery targets the sensitive data that hasn't been accessed or used for some time, providing a comprehensive view of where such data resides within the environment. But how does data discovery at Safetica work? Data discovery runs a smart scans in your environment, giving you a clear visibility into locations containing such a sensitive information. I would like to emphasize the automatic aspect of this feature. Discovery is turned on by default. You don't need to set anything up. It immediately starts providing you with the value after the installation. This can be used for gaining a greater insight not only into the product itself, but into your own environment. By default, data discovery focuses primarily on critical paths. Those are such paths which are to be considered most risk-prone, and they immediately protect your perimeter. How can our data discovery scan be smart? One of the more straightforward features is the smart context. Scanning is only executed on the files that are new to the data discovery scan or to the files that have already been scanned, but from the last scan have been modified. This is to prevent the usage of unnecessary additional power resources. Let me get next to the Safetica data classification. There are three pillars upon which we built our classification system. It is the content, context, and the attributes. Content is all about what the file contains, the words, the numbers, special characters, and it is precisely the content where the strength of our predefined algorithms resides. I will talk about this in a minute. Next, the second, we have the context. Context, as Anna mentioned, deals with the file's history, its origin, and its current location. We are capable of tracking a common ancestor of two different files with the same origin, thanks to this pillar. Last but not least, there are the attributes. Attributes are the file qualities that can change, be modified over its lifespan, or are provided by the third-party labeling solution, such as Microsoft Information Protection. With these three pillars of data classification in mind, let's see how our data classification can be considered smart. There are 6 functionalities that I would like to present to you today of the Safetica Smart Classification. And I would like to start with the first functionality, which is based on the many years Safetica is in the data loss protection industry. Safetica provides valuable predefined algorithms covering the vast majority of the use cases following the industry's best practices. I can mention the GDPR, the HIPAA, or specifically credit card numbers, legal entity numbers, region-specific social and health insurance numbers, various IDs, and much more. With these predefined classifications and rules, you are sure to have your own protection needs met and catered for without any need for manual tinkering. All comes ready for you at Safetica. The next smart feature is the smart integration with Microsoft Information Labels, MIP or AIP. After the synchronization with the M365, all the Microsoft Information Labels are propagated throughout your environment and can be easily applied for the data loss prevention use. This means that you don't need to set anything up for the second time. You simply keep using what you have already established in your environment, and Safetica works with it. Now, I would like to speak about the sensitive content matches. It's a very fast and direct way for the admins to easily reach the interesting data operations with the highest number of sensitive content hits. As you can see, I have the logs nicely ordered by the column sensitive content matches, and I can analyze further each and every case which might be interesting for myself. Next, there is the classification detail. This empowers you with the information for every data operation which managed to make a classification hit. This provides you with the whys. Why was the operation logged? And with the whats? what exactly the hits were. Thanks to this, we can immediately spot why the logs were generated and what type of sensitive information was part of the data operation. It is a tremendously valuable information that the administrators can work with in their investigations. Next, we have the partial classification result. I'm very happy to talk about this because this is a very fresh and exciting feature contributing to the mitigation of the false negatives which have been mentioned. The partial classification results provides information about the data operations which have not met the classification rule that you established, but you might be interesting for you. As you can see in the screenshot in the left side, for the classification rule, I set the threshold to be 10. And in the right screenshot, you see why the classification was met, but was met only partially. It was because the detection trigger was not met fully. This means, for example, that the files that we are dealing with only contain 5 unique occurrences of the sensitive information that you set up in your classification. It was not 10, but still it might be a potential information leak, and it is only good that you are being informed and can deal with this in order to make the rules for the future more specific, more precise. Last but not least, we have the dynamic policies. Dynamic policies are quite a revolutionary feature because they are turning black and white DLP systems into a much more granular and gradual approach to the data events and data operations. Thanks to the data policies, Safetica is capable of differentiating the usual events and operations from the unusual ones. Let's say that the example would be the HR department. The HR department employees need to be allowed to work with the dozens of CVs every single day. But what about a spike when a single HR employee works with 1,000 CVs? Should it not raise an eyebrow? Safetica's evaluation of data operations in dynamic DLP is based on smart algorithms and risk calculation, doing the hard work for you, eliminating such spikes and making your environment more safe and secure. So here are the 6 ways how our classification is smart and caters to you and helps you reach the desired security and safety. We have the valuable predefined algorithms. We have the smart integration with Microsoft information labels. We have the sensitive content matches, classification detail, partial classification result, and dynamic policies. I would like to briefly share with you how Safetica addresses the aforementioned challenges. First, we have the false positives and false negatives. The false positives usually create the unnecessary alarms, which is usually a sign of rules which are unnecessarily strict. Safetica addresses this by providing you with a fine granularity of data classification, rules, and policies. False negatives, on the other hand, Safetica handles by providing the partial classification result, which I presented in the previous slides. When not all the classification rules are being met, this is when the partial classification result shines. Based on the smart analysis, Safetica recognizes that the file might be of interest to you and marks the file operation for you. The second challenge that we have is the data volume and variety. The primary focus of Safetica is on the files that the users will actively work with and the risks associated with the action per se. This focus significantly lowers the scale at any given moment when it comes to the calculating and power efficiency. When it comes to the sheer variety, Safetica's parsing data solution can recognize over 1,000 of file formats, having you fully covered. Next, we have the data silos. Having data stored across multiple systems should not be any problem for Safetica. Thanks to Safetica's application integration, together with the Office 365 Microsoft integration, we cover all of the data flows present within the company's data silos, and thus you have the environment fully protected. The fourth challenge being the dynamic data environments. Safetica monitors all the data operations taking place in your environment and remediates them accordingly. That is the way you set Safetica to remediate it. Once you set up your classification in alignment with your goals and your policies, there is no need to change them. Last but not least, we have the integration with existing systems. Safetica's primary integration is with the Microsoft environment, where we assure the highest level of coverage without any gaps. So here we have it, the whole classification cycle. First, you need to discover and classify the data you wish to protect. You can utilize the predefined templates that I've shared with you, or you can create your own classification, rule by rule. The granularity of Safetica's solution allows you to be very thorough and detailed. Then, you need to establish data policies by firmly defining your security perimeter, knowing and understanding when the data is at risk. Without understanding your perimeter, it is very challenging to establish the policies which would cater to it and establish the protection that is desirable. And finally, the third point, you enforce and educate, either with our pop-ups and notification for your employees and administrators in Safetica, or through any other convenient means. This would wrap up my part of the presentation, and I would like to thank you for attention. The next part is going to be dealing with the Q&A section.
Thank you, Tomasz. The floor is now open for questions. Let me just quickly check if we have questions from the audience. We don't have any questions, but I will give you 10 more seconds to submit any questions if you have any clarifications, questions that you need to address or that you need more clarity on. Feel free to again submit your question on the questions panel. All right, it seems that we did hopefully give you a very clear and concise explanation of data discovery and data classification and how Safetica makes these two processes more clever and also addresses any customer or organizational pain points that you have. If you want to have or if you want to see Safetica, the Safetica product in action, feel free to visit www.safetica.com/demo and schedule, of course, a demo with one of our data security experts. And again, if you want to know what, if there's any topic that you want to hear about next, feel free, of course, to reach out to us at marketing@safetica.com. We do have another exciting webinar next week on insider risk management. So do watch out for the follow-up email and you'll get an invite from there. So again, thank you. Thank you to my partner, Tomasz. And thanks everyone for joining this webinar. Have a great day.